Chemical composition of water in Camas, Washington. Water contamination in any form or source has a large impact on humans, plants, and many other organisms. This is why we decided to test for various chemicals in Camas, Washington. We compared the results with the recommended amounts and set by the EPA. We predicted that a larger amount of nutrient pollution in more productive lakes and larger amounts of corroding metals in buildings with older piping. Our results were inconclusive, but the chemical contents for all the samples were within federal standards. Our study aims to raise awareness about regularly monitoring water quality and ensuring the safety of those using it.
For our materials and methods, we collected water from nearby lakes, school drinking water fountains, and household taps, and we did this in both November and February. Figure 1 shows one of the test kits that we used to test the chemical composition of our water samples, and Figure 2 shows the locations in Camas that we collected our water from. So the drinking fountains from the schools are in blue, the tap water is in green, and the lakes are in yellow. We tested all these water samples for pH, nitrates, dissolved oxygen, phosphates, copper for the drinking water, and ammonia for the lake water. We also made sure to observe the color, clearness, and debris in the lake water samples, just to see any extra added details.
So for the pH, it was around neutral for tap and drinking fountain water and slightly more basic for lake water with a maximum of 8.2. The nitrates were slightly higher than the average for tap water than drinking water, and lake water was between 0.5 and 2 ppm. The phosphates were very low with less than 0.025 ppm in all cases, and there was no copper in tap and drinking water, but Prune Hill had 0.25 ppm, which we think might have been due to old piping.
For dissolved oxygen, tap and water fountain had 5 to 7 ppm, and the trials from November to February dropped by 4 ppm in both trials, and Fallen Leaf was left with 4 ppm. Ammonia was barely detected in the lake water. It was less than 0.25 ppm, and the lake samples were slightly blue and yellow, and some were clear while some had specks of debris.
The top graph shows the average of chemicals found in the lakes from samples we took once in November and another time in February. The bottom graph shows the average of the chemicals found in household tap water versus school drinking fountains.
The chemical content of all the water that we tested were all within federal standards, which means it's all safe to drink. And we found that the dissolved oxygen in Fallen Leaf Lake dropped a lot. It dropped from 10 to 4 ppm from fall to winter, and similar drops occurred to the other lakes as well. This is really stressful for the aquatic species and aquatic life in the lakes because it's hard for them to survive with not enough dissolved oxygen, and 4 ppm is already extremely low. And this may have been because of the rapid change of temperatures from fall to winter.
For our samples for tap and drinking fountain water, we found that 2 of the houses had nitrate levels of 2 and 3 ppm, which were higher than the average, and we thought that this might have been due to pollution along the transportation route. We also found more copper in some older drinking fountains, which also suggests a slight correlation with the age of piping affecting corrosion. In Figure 5, it shows our t-test analysis for if location affected the chemicals in potable water, and we were able to accept the null hypothesis that it didn't. An obstacle we faced in conducting our research was that some of the test kits had unclear instructions, and it was also kind of hard to tell slight differences between the colors. In the future, we hope to use better testing kits to get better results, and also we weren't able to test rainwater in our experiment because there were time constraints.
So in conclusion, our results from studying the chemical content of the water sources in Camas showed that Camas isn't highly contaminated and everything was within the recommended range by the EPA. And continuing to test the water often will allow us to see the annual patterns for the specific chemical compositions. And our research can be expanded by looking for a correlation between bacterial contaminants in the water that may cause waterborne diseases such as E. coli. And we can also get more data for lakes to refine our results as well as test rainwater in the future. As we mentioned before, we weren't able to for this experiment.
For our acknowledgements, we would like to thank Mrs. Roberts for lending us testing kits to test our water, and we would like to thank Abe for helping us throughout this research process. Thank you for listening.